I found the phone taped to the underside of a shelf in my wife's closet, hidden behind a row of winter sweaters, and the moment it buzzed in my hand with a message that said the shipment cleared, "Don't worry," I felt my entire marriage crack open like ice under my feet. My name is Grant, I'm 38, and 3 months ago I still believed my wife Vanessa was the most honest person I knew. She worked as an operations manager for a regional trucking company, the kind of job with long hours and constant phone calls, and I never questioned it because she always had an answer ready. Looking back, that should have been the first warning. People who are hiding something always have their story polished. It started small. She began taking calls in the garage with the door shut. She started deleting her browser history, something she never used to bother with. Then one night she came home smelling like a cologne that wasn't mine, and when I asked about it, she laughed it off and said a coworker had hugged her goodbye. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But intelligent people don't ignore patterns, they investigate them. There were other small cracks too. She started guarding her phone like it was made of glass, turning the screen away whenever I walked into the room. She began working weekends she never used to work, claiming inventory audits that somehow never showed up on her calendar. Once I offered to drop off lunch at her office and she practically panicked, telling me not to bother, that visitors weren't allowed on the loading floor anymore. A year earlier she would have laughed and told me to come by anytime. Something had shifted, and I could feel it even before I had proof. So I hired a private investigator named Rosa Delgado, a former county detective who now ran her own agency 2 towns over. I told her I suspected an affair and I wanted proof before I said a single word to Vanessa. Rosa took the case seriously, and within a week she had photographs of Vanessa meeting a man named Curtis Boyle at a motel off the interstate twice a week. I sat in my truck outside Rosa's office and stared at those pictures for a long time, feeling something in my chest go completely numb. But Rosa wasn't finished. She said something felt off about the whole situation, that Curtis Boyle wasn't just some random affair. He was listed as a logistics coordinator for the same trucking company Vanessa worked for. She asked for 2 more weeks to dig deeper, and against every instinct screaming at me to confront Vanessa immediately, I agreed. That decision changed everything. Rosa came back with a folder that made my stomach turn. Vanessa and Curtis weren't just sleeping together. They were running a cargo fraud scheme, filing false damage claims on shipments that were never actually damaged, splitting insurance payouts that totaled almost $400,000 over 18 months. The hidden phone wasn't for arranging dates, it was their business line, used to coordinate falsified paperwork with a corrupt claims adjuster named Wendell Pruitt. The affair was real, but it was almost a footnote next to the crime underneath it. I remember sitting at my kitchen table with that folder open, my hands shaking, thinking about every argument we'd had about money over the past year, every time she said things were tight even though her paycheck should have covered our bills easily. I thought about the vacation we canceled last summer because she said we needed to save, and the used car she talked me into instead of the newer one I wanted, telling me it wasn't the right time to spend. All of it had been a performance. She wasn't struggling. She was stealing, and she was doing it well enough that I never once suspected the woman across the dinner table from me. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't confront her the next night either. Instead, I called my brother-in-law, who works as a fraud investigator for a different insurance company, and asked him quietly what someone should do if they suspected coordinated insurance fraud. He told me plainly, you go to the company's fraud hotline and you go to the police, and you do not tip off the people involved, because evidence disappears fast once people panic. So that's exactly what I did. I made copies of everything Rosa had gathered, the photographs, the phone records, the falsified claim forms she had somehow photographed through a cracked office door, and I mailed them anonymously to the trucking company's corporate fraud department along with a formal report to our state's insurance fraud bureau. I kept the originals locked in a safety deposit box under my own name, something Vanessa didn't even know existed. 3 weeks later, Vanessa came home pale and shaking, saying investigators had shown up at her office and escorted her out with a box of her belongings. She cried on the kitchen floor and told me everything, or at least her version of everything. She said Curtis had pressured her into it, that they needed the money because of some investment he'd lost, that she felt trapped once she started because backing out would mean confessing to a crime she'd already committed. I let her talk. I let her cry. And then I told her I already knew, all of it, the affair and the fraud, because I had proof going back months. I watched her face change from grief to horror as she realized I hadn't just found out that night. I had known for weeks and let the consequences arrive naturally instead of warning her. She asked me how I could do that to her, how I could watch her walk into disaster without saying anything. I told her the truth. I said I didn't do anything to her. She did this to herself, to us, to our marriage, and all I did was refuse to help her hide it. She kept asking why I didn't just confront her the moment I found the phone, why I let her keep digging a deeper hole for weeks. I told her that if I had confronted her that first night, she would have had time to cover her tracks, and I wasn't willing to let that happen, not to me, not to the company she was defrauding, and not to whatever version of honesty was left between us. The investigation moved fast once corporate got involved. Wendell Pruitt, the claims adjuster, turned on both of them almost immediately once investigators offered him a reduced sentence for cooperation. Curtis Boyle was arrested first, and 2 weeks later Vanessa was formally charged with insurance fraud, conspiracy, and falsifying business records. I filed for divorce the same week the charges were announced, citing infidelity and financial misconduct, and because I had documented proof of the affair and her hidden income from the scheme, the judge awarded me the house and let me keep my retirement accounts fully protected. Vanessa took a plea deal that included restitution and 18 months in a minimum security facility. Curtis got worse, since prosecutors treated him as the one who recruited her into the scheme. The trucking company's insurance carrier recovered most of the stolen money by seizing assets from both of them, including a car Vanessa had bought with fraud proceeds and told me was a work bonus. The hardest part wasn't the affair, honestly. Affairs are common, painful, but common. What broke something deeper in me was realizing my wife had built an entire second life, a criminal one, and lied to my face about our finances for over a year while I worked overtime trying to cover bills that were actually being padded by her secret income. She let me feel guilty about money while she was hiding stacks of it. People ask me now if I regret waiting those extra weeks instead of confronting her the night I found the phone. I don't. If I had confronted her immediately, she would have destroyed the evidence, warned Curtis, and possibly walked away with the affair as her only real consequence. Waiting, gathering proof, and letting professionals handle it properly meant she couldn't talk her way out of anything. The truth simply outweighed her. Rosa Delgado still checks in every few months, and I always tell her the same thing. She didn't just catch a cheater. She uncovered a crime that would have kept unraveling my life quietly for years. Vanessa writes me letters sometimes from the facility, apologizing, explaining, asking for understanding. I don't respond anymore. Some people mistake silence for cruelty, but sometimes silence is just clarity. I already gave her every chance to tell the truth, and she chose the phone in the closet over honesty every single time. I sold the house eventually and moved somewhere quieter, somewhere without motels down the interstate or hidden shelves in closets. I still think about that buzzing phone sometimes, how something so small cracked open something so enormous. But I don't feel broken by it anymore. I feel like a man who trusted his instincts, followed the evidence, and let the truth do exactly what truth always does when you give it enough time. It wins.